When a poor boy saves a little girl from being hit by a car, her millionaire father offers money as a reward. But what this boy asks for instead will shock you completely. Watch to discover what hidden connection exists between their families and how this brave act changed everything. Where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe to see what happens next. The first light of dawn crept through the threadbare curtains of the small one-bedroom apartment. Caspar Russell stirred on the worn couch that had served as his bed for as long as he could remember. At 15, he was lanky with unruly brown hair that fell across his forehead, no matter how many times he pushed it back. His hands, though young, were calloused from years of work. The apartment was quiet, except for the labored breathing coming from behind the bedroom door. Caspar moved with practiced efficiency, washing his face in the small sink, changing into his work clothes and preparing a simple breakfast of oatmeal. He divided it into 2 bowls, adding a spoonful of honey to one. "Dad," Caspar called softly, knocking on the bedroom door before entering. "Time for breakfast." Thaddeus Russell lay propped against pillows, his once robust frame now thin and frail. Despite his illness, his eyes lit up when Caspar entered. At 48, Thaddeus looked much older, his face lined with the marks of struggle and illness, but the warmth in his smile remained unchanged. "Morning, son," he said, his voice raspy. "You're up early again." Caspar set the tray on the bedside table. "Mr. Peterson said I could have an extra crate of strawberries today. They're selling well." Thaddeus frowned. "You should be studying, not selling fruit." "I study in the afternoons," Caspar replied, helping his father sit up straighter, "and Mrs. Gonzalez from 3B helps me with math on Tuesdays." He handed his father the bowl with honey. "Eat while it's warm." The small room spoke, volumes of their circumstances. A rickety dresser held Thaddeus's few clothes. On top sat framed photographs, one of a much healthier Thaddeus holding a toddler, Caspar another of a beautiful woman with Caspar's same expressive eyes. Beside these treasured items lay bottles of medication, each one representing a significant portion of their meager income. "How's the pain today?" Caspar asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Thaddeus shrugged. "Manageable." His hands trembled as he raised the spoon. Caspar pretended not to notice. "Dr. Winters said the new medication should start working better soon. Dr. Winters also said it would take a miracle to afford the treatment I really need," Thaddeus replied, but immediately regretted his words when he saw Caspar's face fall. "Hey, don't worry about me. I've been fighting this for years. I'm not going anywhere." Caspar nodded, but his mind was already calculating how many extra hours he could work, how many more strawberries he could sell. The medication was helping, but barely. What his father needed was specialized treatment they simply couldn't afford. "Mr. Peterson is expecting me," Caspar said, finishing his breakfast quickly. "Mrs. Gonzalez will check on you at noon. Be careful." "Out there," Thaddeus called as Caspar gathered his worn backpack. At the door, Caspar paused, taking in the sight of his father, the only family he had known. "I'll be back by 3. We can play chess if you're feeling up to it." Outside, the air was crisp with early spring freshness. Caspar walked briskly through streets that gradually transformed from the working-class neighborhood where he lived to the bustling market district. The sky was brightening, promising a clear day. Good for sales. He picked up his pace, filled with determination. Today would be a good day. It had to be. The Riverside Market was already humming with activity when Caspar arrived. Vendors called out their wares, the aroma of fresh bread mingled with the scent of flowers and fruit, and early customers navigated the colorful stalls. Caspar made his way to Mr. Peterson's fruit stand, where the older man was arranging apples in neat pyramids. "Right on time as always," Mr. Peterson greeted him, his weathered face crinkling with a smile. "The strawberries just arrived. Premium quality this week." Caspar's eyes widened at the sight of the vibrant red berries. "They look amazing." "You've got the best spot today," Mr. Peterson continued, pointing to the corner of the stand. "More foot traffic." Setting up his section, Caspar arranged the strawberries, artfully placing the most perfect ones on top. He'd learned early that presentation mattered. Soon he had a steady stream of customers, his engaging smile and earnest manner drawing people to his corner. By mid-morning, the market was packed. Across the street, a bakery had a line stretching onto the sidewalk. Luxury cars occasionally pulled. up their owners dispatching drivers or household staff to gather the finest produce. Casper was carefully weighing strawberries for an elderly customer when the commotion began. A sleek black car had pulled up, and a girl about Casper's age had stepped out apparently against her chauffeur's wishes. She wore a private school uniform, a pleated skirt and blazer with an embroidered crest, and moved with the confident grace of someone unaccustomed to being denied. "Miss Emerson, please wait," the chauffeur called, but the girl Emerson was already weaving through the market stalls, her eyes alight with curiosity. Casper found himself watching her, struck by how out of place she looked in her pristine uniform, amidst the market's controlled chaos. She moved like someone discovering treasure in ordinary things, stopping to examine handcrafted jewelry with the same interest she showed for a display of exotic spices. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Emerson, enthralled by a display of hand-woven scarves, stepped backward into the street without looking. A delivery truck rounded the corner, its driver distracted by a ringing phone. The chauffeur shouted, but he was too far away. Casper didn't remember making the decision to move. One moment he was behind his stand, the next he was lunging toward the street, dropping the container of strawberries he'd been holding. He reached Emerson just as she turned toward the sound of the truck's horn, her eyes widening in shock. Casper grabbed her arm, pulling her forcefully back onto the sidewalk as the truck roared past, missing them by inches. They tumbled backward, Casper taking the brunt of the fall. For a moment, they just stayed there, the girl's shoulders heaving, with startled breaths against him, while the chauffeur and several bystanders rushed toward them. "Are you okay?" Casper asked, helping her sit up. Emerson stared at him, her hazel eyes still wide with shock. You saved me." She managed her voice surprisingly steady despite the circumstance. Before Casper could respond, the chauffeur reached them, followed closely by a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit who had emerged from the black car. "Emerson?" The man knelt beside them, his face ashen. "What were you thinking, running off like that?" "I'm fine, Dad," Emerson said, her composure returning quickly. "Thanks to him." She gestured to Casper, who was now brushing dirt from his clothes, acutely aware of his threadbare jeans and faded T-shirt next to their finery. The man turned to Casper, his expression shifting from panic to profound gratitude. "Young man, He seemed at a loss for words, then extended his hand. "Warren Blake, you saved my daughter's life." Casper shook his hand awkwardly. "Casper Russell." "Sir?" "And anyone would have done the same. Not everyone would have reacted so quickly," Warren insisted. He pulled out a wallet from his inside pocket. "I need to repay you somehow." Casper flushed, taking a step back. "No, sir, please, I don't want money." Warren looked surprised, studying Casper more carefully. "Then, how can I thank you?" Casper thought of the spilled strawberries, of Mr. Peterson's kindness, of his father's medication. Something compelled him to speak honestly, though he never asked for help. "Actually, sir, if you really want to help, my father is sick. He needs medicine we can barely afford." Emerson, now on her feet, watched Casper with a new interest in her eyes. Her father's expression changed too, becoming thoughtful. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," Warren suggested, gesturing toward his car. "If you can spare a moment." Casper looked back at the fruit stand, where Mr. Peterson was watching with undisguised curiosity. "Go on," the older man called. "I'll cover for you." With one hesitant nod, Casper stepped toward the car, unaware that this moment would forever alter the course of his life. The interior of Warren Blake's car felt like another world to Casper. The leather seats were softer than any bed he'd slept on, and the quiet hum of the engine was barely perceptible as they glided through the streets. Emerson sat beside her father, occasionally stealing glances at Casper. "So, Casper," Warren began, his deep voice, gentle but commanding, "tell me about your father's situation." Casper hesitated, unused to discussing their private struggles with strangers, especially someone of Warren's evident wealth and status, but something in the man's sincere gaze prompted honesty. "My dad has a rare autoimmune condition," Casper explained. "He used to work construction until the symptoms got too bad. For the past 3 years, he's mostly been bedridden. The basic medications help with the pain, but what he really needs is a specialized treatment protocol that our insurance won't cover." Warren nodded, his expression revealing nothing. And your mother? She died when I was 4, Casper said simply. It's just been me and Dad since then. At this, Emerson's composed facade cracked slightly, her eyes softening with empathy. You work at the market to support him? Warren inquired. That and odd jobs around the neighborhood, Mrs. Gonzalez from our building watches him when I'm out. The car pulled up outside a small cafe, and Warren gestured for them to go inside. Once seated in a private corner with drinks before them, coffee for Warren, hot chocolate for Emerson and Casper, Warren leaned forward. Casper, I don't believe in coincidence. Today you saved what is most precious to me in this world. His voice carried an emotional weight that surprised Casper. I'm in a position to help your father, and I'd like to do so. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but please hear me out, Warren continued. I own Riverside Memorial Hospital. We have specialists who could evaluate your father's condition and develop a proper treatment plan. Casper stared, speechless. Riverside Memorial was the city's premier medical facility, known for innovative treatments and world-class physicians. It might as well have been on another planet for all that it was accessible to people like him and his father. You do that? For us, Casper finally managed. You don't even know us. I know enough, Warren said firmly. You risked yourself for my daughter without a thought of reward. That tells me everything important about your character. Emerson, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. You should let us help Casper. Dad's not just saying this because he feels obligated, he means it. Casper looked between them, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. My dad is proud. He might not accept charity, even if it's what he needs. Warren smiled slightly. Then we won't call it charity. I've been wanting to start a patient outreach program for underserved communities. Your father could be our first participant, helping us develop the program while receiving treatment. That might work, Casper admitted, hope rising within him for the first time in years. Excellent. Warren pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my personal number. Can I send a car for you and your father tomorrow morning? Casper nodded, still dazed by the sudden change in their fortunes. As they finished their drinks and prepared to leave, Emerson touched his arm lightly. Thank you again, she said softly. Not many people would have done what you did. I'm just glad I was there, Casper replied honestly. Outside, Warren instructed his chauffeur to take Casper home despite his protests that he needed to return to the market. I'll call Mr. Peterson myself, Warren assured him. Your father should hear this news from you. As the car pulled away, from the cafe, Casper clutched Warren's business card, its embossed lettering tangible proof that this wasn't simply an elaborate dream. For the first time in years, he felt something fragile taking root within his chest. Hope that his father might actually get better. Behind him, Warren watched the car disappear around a corner, an unreadable expression on his face. Dad, Emerson questioned, noticing her father's unusual pensiveness. There's something familiar about that boy, Warren murmured. Something I can't quite place. Emerson looked surprised. Do you think you've met him before? Warren shook his head slowly. No, but... He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders decisively. Come on. We have arrangements to make. As they walked to their waiting car, Warren's mind was already racing, formulating plans that extended far beyond medical treatment for Casper's ailing father. This can't be real, Thaddeus said for the third time, staring at Warren Blake's business card in his trembling hands. Things like this don't just happen. Casper sat on the edge of the bed, watching his father's face cycle through disbelief, suspicion, and fragile hope. I know it sounds crazy, but Mr. Blake seemed genuine. He owns Riverside Memorial, Dad, the whole hospital. Thaddeus ran a hand through his thinning hair. And he wants to help us because you saved his daughter just like that, no strings attached. He said something about a new outreach program, that you'd be helping them develop it. Thaddeus didn't look convinced, but Casper could see the yearning in his eyes. After years of managing pain and gradual decline, the possibility of proper treatment was almost too precious to contemplate. What do we have to lose by meeting with them? Casper pressed gently. Thaddeus sighed. My dignity, maybe. But he smiled weakly. All right. We'll see what this Mr. Blake has to say. The next morning, precisely at 9, a sleek car arrived at their apartment building, drawing curious stares from neighbors. The chauffeur, the same man from the market incident, helped Thaddeus into the car with respectful efficiency, while Casper followed with a small bag containing his father's current medications and medical records. Riverside Memorial Hospital stood like a gleaming beacon on the city's affluent east side, its modern glass facade reflecting the morning sunlight. Inside, instead of joining the queue at the reception desk, they were greeted personally by a woman in a tailored suit. "Mr. Russell Casper, welcome," she said warmly. "I'm Dr. Helena Chen, Chief of Medicine. Mr. Blake asked me to oversee your care personally." Thaddeus straightened in his wheelchair, his expression guarded. "That's very kind, but unnecessary. I'm sure your regular doctors are perfectly capable." Dr. Chen smiled. "They are, but your case is of particular interest from a research perspective. Mr. Blake mentioned you might be hesitant about special treatment, but I assure you we're as interested in learning from you as we are in helping you." Her tactful approach seemed to ease some of Thaddeus's tension. As they followed her through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and polish, Casper marveled at the difference between this facility and the crowded clinic they usually visited. They were shown to a private consultation room where Warren Blake was waiting. He rose to greet them, his handshake firm as he introduced himself to Thaddeus. "Mr. Russell, it's a pleasure to meet you. Your son is quite remarkable." "He is that," Thaddeus agreed, studying Warren carefully, "though I'm still not entirely clear on why you're doing this." Warren gestured for everyone to sit. "Straight to the point." "I appreciate that." He leaned forward slightly. "When someone saves your child's life, a simple thank you seems inadequate. But more than that, meeting Casper has reminded me of a project I've been meaning to implement for some time. A program to extend our advanced care to those who wouldn't normally have access to it." Dr. Chen nodded. "We've been discussing this initiative for months, but sometimes it takes a catalyst to move from concept to action. In other words," Thaddeus said dryly, "we're your guinea pigs." Instead of taking offense, Warren laughed. "In a manner of speaking, yes, but very well treated. Guinea pigs, I assure you." Over the next hour, Dr. Chen outlined a comprehensive treatment plan. Thaddeus would undergo a series of tests to precisely identify his condition's current state, followed by a tailored protocol that included both medication and physical therapy. Throughout the explanation, Casper watched his father's skepticism gradually give way to cautious optimism. "And the cost?" Thaddeus finally asked. "As I mentioned, you would be participating in our outreach program," Warren replied smoothly. "Your feedback on the process will be invaluable as we refine it for wider implementation." Thaddeus didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded slowly. "And what about Casper? I can't be here all day while he's trying to work and study." Warren exchanged a glance with Dr. Chen before responding. "Actually, I wanted to discuss that as well. Casper mentioned he's been handling his education somewhat independently." "We've made do," Thaddeus said defensively. "I'm sure you have," Warren acknowledged. "But Casper showed remarkable quick thinking and courage at the market. Those are qualities that should be nurtured with proper opportunity." Casper frowned, not following where this was leading. "Riverside Academy is one of the top schools in the state," Warren continued. "My daughter Emerson attends there. They have a scholarship program for exceptional students, and I've taken the liberty of recommending Casper for consideration." Casper's jaw dropped. "A private school, sir, I don't think—" "You'd need to take placement tests, of course," Warren went on as if the matter were already settled. "But given what I've observed of your character and intelligence, I have no doubt you'd qualify." Thaddeus's expression hardened. "We don't need your charity, Mr. Blake." "It's not charity," Warren countered firmly. "It's investment in both of you. The program needs participants like you to succeed, and Casper deserves educational opportunities commensurate with his potential." A tense silence followed. Casper looked between his father and Warren, torn between overwhelming gratitude and understanding of his father's pride. "Perhaps," Dr. Chen suggested gently, "you could view it as an exchange. Your participation helps us develop a valuable program, And in return we provide medical care and educational opportunity. Thaddeus held Warren's gaze for a long moment before sighing. You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Blake. Warren, please. All right, Warren, we'll try your program and Casper can take the placement tests. But if at any point this feels wrong, we walk away. Deal. Warren smiled, extending his hand again. Deal. As they shook hands, Casper couldn't help feeling that something monumental had just occurred, like the shifting of tectonic plates beneath their lives, realigning everything they had known. Dr. Chen stood. Let's get those initial tests started. Shall we, Casper? There's a comfortable waiting area where you can study. I've taken the liberty of providing some materials to help you prepare for the placement exams. As they were led in different directions, Casper looked back at his father, who gave him a reassuring nod. Despite the whirlwind of changes, one thing remained constant. They were facing it together as they always had. What neither of them noticed was Warren lingering in the doorway, watching Thaddeus with an expression of profound curiosity, as if trying to recall something just beyond the reach of memory. The entrance to Riverside Academy loomed before Casper, its red brick facade and wrought iron gates more intimidating than any challenge he had faced before. Students streamed past him in their crisp uniforms, chattering and laughing seemingly. Oblivious to their privilege, Casper adjusted his own new uniform, the stiff collar still unfamiliar against his neck, the polished shoes pinching slightly. 2 weeks had passed in a blur since their first meeting with Warren Blake. Thaddeus had begun treatments that already showed promising results, and Casper had passed the placement tests with scores that surprised everyone except his father. Now, here he stood on his first day, frozen between two worlds. You look like you're about to face a firing squad, a familiar voice observed. Casper turned to find Emerson Blake watching him with amusement, her hazel eyes sparkling. In the controlled environment of the school, she seemed even more in her element than she had at the market. Is it that obvious? Casper asked, attempting a smile. Only to someone who's been watching for you. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Dad told me you'd be starting today. I thought you might want a friendly face. Relief washed over him. I definitely do. Thanks. As they walked together through the gates, Casper felt the stares of other students, heard the whispers that followed them. Emerson either didn't notice or chose to ignore them, maintaining a steady commentary about the buildings, the teachers, the unwritten rules of Riverside Academy. That's the science complex, best labs in the state. Over there is the arts center. The cafeteria is through that courtyard. The food's actually decent. Oh, and avoid Mr. Hargrove's history class if you can. He's brilliant but gives pop quizzes like they're going out of style. Casper tried to absorb it all, but his attention kept being drawn to the obvious wealth around him. The manicured grounds, the state-of-the-art facilities, the casual displays of expensive watches and designer bags among the students. This place is, he began. Overwhelming, Emerson suggested. I was going to say, from another planet, but that works too. She laughed, a genuine sound that drew more stares. You'll get used to it. The academics are challenging, but from what Dad said about your test scores, you'll do fine. They reached the administrative office where Casper was to receive his schedule and official welcome. This is where I leave you, Emerson said, but find me at lunch, second period, Central Courtyard. I will, Casper promised, grateful for the lifeline. The morning passed in a disorienting succession of classrooms, teachers, and curious glances. Despite Casper's best efforts to remain inconspicuous, word had somehow spread about the scholarship kid who had saved Emerson Blake. Some teachers made a point of welcoming him warmly. Others seemed to watch him with skepticism, as if waiting for him to prove he didn't belong. His first real challenge came in advanced placement literature, where Mr. Phillips, a stern-faced man with wire-rimmed glasses, called on him unexpectedly. Mr. Russell, since you're joining us mid-semester, I'm curious about your previous exposure to the classics. What are your thoughts on Dickens's use of social commentary in Great Expectations? The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Casper. He felt his face grow warm, but then remembered the countless hours he'd spent in the public library, devouring whatever books he could find, during the times when his father was stable enough to be left alone. I think Dickens used Pip's journey To highlight how wealth corrupts as much as it elevates, Casper replied carefully. The contrast between Pip's humble beginnings and his later snobbery shows that social class isn't just about money, it's about character. Mr. Phillips's eyebrows rose slightly. An interesting perspective. And how would you compare Pip's experience to modern social mobility? The conversation that followed was unexpectedly engaging, drawing in other students, as Casper found his footing in the discussion. By the time the bell rang, he had earned a nod of approval from Mr. Phillips and looks of reassessment from his classmates. When lunchtime arrived, Casper made his way to the central courtyard, where groups of students clustered around elegant stone tables. He spotted Emerson waving to him from a table where several other students sat. "Everyone, this is Casper," she announced as he approached. "Casper, meet the squad." The introductions washed over him: Aidan, whose father was a state senator; Madison, the school's star debater Tyler, who captained the tennis team, and several others, whose names and notable attributes blurred together. "So you're the hero we've been hearing about," Aidan said, his tone difficult to read. "Emerson says you pulled her out of traffic." Casper shrugged uncomfortably. "I just reacted." "And now you're here on a special Blake scholarship." "Another boy," James added with a faint edge to his voice. "Lucky break." "I worked for it," Casper responded, a hint of defensiveness creeping in. "Of course you did," Emerson interjected smoothly. "Casper aced the placement tests. Mr. Phillips already loves him." The conversation shifted, but Casper remained aware of the undercurrents, the subtle evaluations taking place. He was an unknown element in their carefully structured social ecosystem, neither entirely welcome nor explicitly rejected. As lunch progressed, the questions became more personal, more probing. "So what does your dad do?" Madison asked between bites of her gourmet salad. "He's between jobs at the moment," Casper replied carefully. "Health issues." "And your mom?" Tyler inquired. "She passed away when I was young." A brief awkward silence followed, broken by James's too casual query. "Where do you live, dear Westside?" Casper answered, watching several of them exchange glances at the mention of the working-class neighborhood. "That must be quite a commute," Aidan observed. Before Casper could respond, Emerson cut in again. "Dad's arranging for a transportation stipend as part of the scholarship. It's a pilot program." The bell signaling the end of lunch period provided a welcome reprieve. As they gathered their things, Emerson pulled Casper aside. "Don't let them get to you," she said quietly. "They're just threatened by someone new, especially someone who didn't get here the same way they did." "I don't belong here, do I?" Casper asked, giving voice to the doubt that had shadowed him all day. Emerson's expression grew serious. "Maybe not yet, but you will. You earned your place, Casper. Don't let anyone make you forget that." As they walked toward their afternoon classes, Casper pondered her words. Perhaps belonging wasn't something that happened instantly, but rather a process of gradually finding your footing in new terrain. Like his father learning to walk again in physical therapy, Casper would need to take it one step at a time, sometimes faltering, but always moving forward. 3 weeks into his new life at Riverside Academy, Casper sat alone in the library, surrounded by open textbooks and notes. The afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden patterns across the polished wooden tables. He had discovered that the library became his sanctuary, a place where academic merit mattered more than social standing. "Mind if I join you?" Casper looked up to find Aidan hovering by his table, an uncharacteristically hesitant expression on his usually confident face. "Sure," Casper replied, surprised. Since that first lunch, Aidan had been politely distant, neither friendly nor openly hostile. Aidan sat pulling out his calculus textbook. "Phillips assigned those killer differential equations, and Madison said you helped her crack the approach." He seemed to struggle with the next words. "I could use some help too." Casper hid his surprise. "Of course, the trick is to recognize the pattern before diving into the solution." For the next hour, they worked through the problems together. Casper found that explaining the concepts to someone else clarified his own understanding, while Aidan proved to be a quick study once he grasped the fundamentals. "You're actually good at this," Aidan admitted as they finished the last problem. Like really good. Math makes sense to me, Casper shrugged. It's the same wherever you go. 2 + 2 = 4 whether you're at Riverside or in Westside. Aidan studied him for a moment. Can I ask you something personal? Casper tensed slightly but nodded. Why did you really help Emerson that day? You must have known she was rich, that her family could help you. The question stung, but Casper kept his voice level. I didn't know who she was. I just saw someone about to get hurt and reacted. I would have done the same for anyone. And you refused money from her father? Yes. Why? Casper closed his calculus book, considering. Because some things shouldn't be about money. Helping someone shouldn't come with a price tag. Aidan leaned back, his expression thoughtful. You know, when I first heard about you, I thought you were running some kind of angle. The scholarship kid who engineered a dramatic rescue to get into Blake's good graces. And now, Casper asked, meeting his gaze steadily, now I think maybe you're just the guy who sees differential equations clearly and helps people because it's the right thing to do. A small smile appeared. It's kind of refreshing, actually. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Tyler and James, who looked surprised to find Aidan and Casper working together. Study session, Tyler asked, dropping into a chair. Casper's a math whisperer, Aidan explained. Saved me from certain calculus doom. James looked skeptical. Lucky you. The tension that had momentarily eased returned. Casper began gathering his books. You don't have to leave, Aidan said. I should check on my dad anyway, Casper replied. He has physical therapy today. How is he? Tyler asked, showing unexpected interest. Better, actually. The new treatment protocol is helping. James scoffed lightly. Another Blake family benefit. Casper stilled his patience, finally wearing thin. What exactly is your problem with me, James? The other boy's eyes widened slightly at the direct confrontation. No problem, just noting that you've had quite a streak of ungood fortune. If you call watching my dad struggle with a debilitating illness for years good fortune, then sure. Casper shouldered his backpack. I worked at a fruit stand instead of going to a real school, so we could afford basic medication. I did homework by flashlight when our electricity was cut off. My dad pushed his body past its limits to provide for us until he physically couldn't anymore. The library had grown quiet, other students now watching the exchange. The treatment he's getting now, it's giving him a chance to walk again, to live without constant pain. If you think I wouldn't trade all of this, he gestured around the library, in a heartbeat to have had him healthy all along, you understand nothing about me or my life. Casper turned to leave, but Emerson's voice stopped him. Tell them the rest, she said, stepping forward from between the stacks. Tell them what you do after school every day. Casper hesitated, but Emerson continued addressing the now substantial audience. Casper still works at the market 3 afternoons a week, not because he has to anymore, but because Mr. Peterson gave him a job when no one else would. He helps Mrs. Gonzalez with her groceries every Sunday because she looked after his dad when he couldn't. He tutors kids at the community center for free because he knows what it's like to not have access to good education. She turned to James directly. You think he engineered some master plan to get a scholarship? He turned down my dad's money. James, who does that? The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken reconsiderations. Aidan stood, moving to stand beside Casper in a clear gesture of support. I think, he said quietly, we all need to recalibrate our assumptions. Later, as Casper walked toward the hospital for his daily visit with his father, he was surprised to find Emerson falling into step beside him. That was quite a speech, he said, still processing the afternoon's events. I just told the truth, she replied. Sometimes people need to hear it. How did you know about Mrs. Gonzalez and the community center? Emerson looked slightly embarrassed. I may have followed you once or twice out of curiosity. You spied on me, Casper asked, more amused than offended. I observed, she corrected primly, and I was impressed by what I saw. They walked in companionable silence for a block before Casper spoke again. Thank you for what you said back there. You earned their respect today, Emerson said. Not because of me, but because you finally showed them who you really are. At the hospital entrance, She surprised him by leaning in to kiss his cheek quickly. "Tell your dad I said hello." As she walked away, Casper touched his cheek, a smile spreading across his face. Perhaps finding his place in this new world wouldn't be as impossible as he'd feared. Like his father learning to stand on his own again, Casper had taken his first real steps toward belonging. Warren Blake sat in his office at Riverside Memorial, staring at the folder on his desk. The evening light cast long shadows across the room, highlighting the lines of fatigue on his face. He had been at the hospital since dawn, reviewing cases, attending board meetings, and checking personally on several patients, including Thaddeus Russell. Thaddeus's progress had been remarkable. The specialized treatment protocol was working, better than expected, and physical therapy was gradually restoring mobility. But it wasn't Thaddeus's medical improvement that occupied Warren's thoughts now. It was the resemblance, subtle but undeniable, that had been nagging at him since their first meeting. Something in the set of Thaddeus's jaw, the timbre of his laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," Warren called. Daniel Mercer, Warren's longtime friend, and the hospital's head of security entered carrying a cup of coffee. "You look like you could use this," Daniel said, placing the cup on Warren's desk. "It's after 8, you know. Emerson called asking if you were ever coming home." Warren rubbed his eyes. "I told her not to wait up." He gestured to the folder. "I've been distracted." Daniel glanced at the unmarked folder. "The Russell case, not the medical case." Warren hesitated, then pushed the folder toward his friend. "Take a look." Daniel flipped it open to reveal a series of photographs, old family snapshots alongside more recent images of Thaddeus Russell. The final page contained a birth certificate and a yellowed newspaper clipping. "My God," Daniel breathed, looking up at Warren. "You think he's my brother?" Warren finished. "Yes." Daniel sank into a chair, stunned. "Your brother who supposedly died in the same accident as your parents?" Warren nodded grimly. "I was 10 when it happened. Theodore was only 5. My authorities never found his body in the river, but after weeks of searching, he trailed off, the painful memories still sharp despite the decades that had passed. But how could he have survived, and why wouldn't he have been returned to you?" "I don't know," Warren admitted. "That's why I asked you to investigate discreetly. The coincidences are too striking to ignore. His age, the physical resemblance, even the first letter of his name. Thaddeus isn't far from Theodore." Daniel studied the photos more carefully. "The timeline fits. Your parents' accident was 43 years ago. Thaddeus Russell appears to be about 48, the right age for Theodore, who would be 45 now." "I need to be certain," Warren said, his voice taut with controlled emotion. "If Thaddeus Russell is really my brother Theodore, if he's been alive all these years, what will you do?" Daniel asked quietly. Warren stared out the window at the city lights. "I don't know, but I need the truth. Can you help me?" "You know I will." Daniel gathered the contents of the folder carefully. "I'll be discreet but thorough. DNA testing would be the most definitive proof." "There's a toothbrush in his hospital room," Warren suggested. "For comparison, you have my sample on file from the hospital's mandatory testing program." Daniel nodded, standing to leave. "Warren, you should prepare yourself. Even if he is Theodore, there's 40 years of separation between you. He may not remember you or his life before the accident. He may not want to know." "I understand," Warren replied, though his heart rebelled against the possibility. "But I have to try. If he's my brother, he deserves to know his true identity. And Casper," his voice softened, "Casper would be my nephew." "I'll start tonight," Daniel promised. "Try to get some rest." After Daniel left, Warren remained at his desk, memories flooding back, a small hand in his as they crossed a street, a gap-toothed smile, a child's laughter. He had been just a boy himself when he lost his entire family in a single night, sent to live with distant relatives who provided material comfort but little emotional warmth. He had built his life and his success from the ashes of that tragedy, driven by a need to create something meaningful from his loss. Riverside Memorial itself had been named in memory of his parents, who had died when their car plunged into the river during a storm. And now, like a ghost stepping out of the past, Theodore might have returned, not as a memory but as a living, breathing man with a son of his own. Warren reached for his phone and dialed home. "Emerson. Yes, I'm still at the hospital." He paused, listening to his daughter's gentle scolding. "I know, sweetheart, but something's come up, and something important. I need to ask you about Casper." As Emerson shared her observations of her new friend, his intelligence, his work ethic, his natural kindness, Warren felt a growing certainty. The qualities she described reminded him of his own father, a man of principle and compassion. "Dad, what's this about?" Emerson finally asked. "You've never been this interested in one of my friends before." Warren considered how much to share. "Let's just say I have a hunch about Casper and his father. A good one. I'll tell you more when I know for certain." After hanging up, Warren turned again to the window, his reflection superimposed over the city lights. Somewhere out there was a truth that had been buried for 4 decades, and he was determined to uncover it, whatever the cost. The DNA results arrived a week later, delivered to Warren's office in a sealed envelope. Daniel Mercer stood by silently, as Warren broke the seal with unsteady hands. "It's a match," Warren breathed, looking up from the paper. 99.9% probability of a full sibling relationship. Daniel squeezed his friend's shoulder. "Congratulations, you found him." Warren sat heavily, overwhelmed by confirmation of what he had increasingly suspected. "Theodore is alive. He's been alive all these years." "What now?" Daniel asked gently. Warren took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Now I tell him the truth. He deserves to know who he really is. And Casper, my nephew." Warren said the word, feeling both strange and right on his tongue. "My brother's son." Planning the revelation required careful consideration. Warren arranged for Thaddeus to be moved to a private suite in the hospital's rehabilitation wing, with a comfortable sitting area where they could talk without interruption. He chose a Saturday when Casper would be visiting, knowing that this truth would change both their lives. When the day arrived, Warren found himself uncharacteristically nervous. He had faced board meetings with billion-dollar implications with less apprehension than he felt approaching this conversation. Emerson had insisted on accompanying him, her curiosity piqued by her father's mysterious behavior. "Their family, Dad," she had argued. "If what you suspect is true, that makes Casper my cousin. I should be there." They paused outside the suite door. Through the small window, Warren could see Thaddeus sitting in a chair by the window, looking stronger than he had in weeks. Casper sat across from him, apparently explaining something from a textbook with animated gestures. "Ready?" Emerson asked. Warren nodded, squaring his shoulders. "Ready." They entered to warm greetings, though Casper looked surprised to see Emerson. "Warren Emerson," Thaddeus said with a smile. "This is an unexpected pleasure." "I hope we're not interrupting," Warren replied, "but I needed to speak with you both about something important." He gestured to the seating area. "May we join you?" Once they were settled, Warren found all his carefully prepared words inadequate for the moment. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and withdrew an old photograph in a silver frame. "Thaddeus, I'd like you to look at this," he said, passing it across. The photograph showed a family, a handsome man with a woman holding a baby and a young boy of about 10 standing beside them. They were posed in front of a large Victorian house, all smiling broadly. Thaddeus studied it politely. "Your family?" "Yes," Warren confirmed. "My parents, James and Eleanor Blake. That's me at 10 years old." He hesitated, then pointed to the baby. "And that's my younger brother, Theodore. He was 5 when our parents died in an accident. He was presumed drowned, his body never recovered." Casper leaned forward, looking at the photograph with newfound interest. "I'm sorry for your loss, but why are you showing us this?" Warren met Thaddeus's eyes directly. "Because I believe Theodore didn't die that night. I believe he survived somehow, lost his memory and grew up with a different name, a different identity." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "I believe that Theodore Blake is you, Thaddeus." The room fell silent. Thaddeus's face showed confusion, then disbelief. That's not possible." I thought the same, Warren acknowledged. But the resemblance between you and my father was striking from our first meeting. Your age matches, and there's the similarity in our names, Theodore Thaddeus. Coincidences? Thaddeus protested, though his voice lacked conviction. That's what I thought at first, Warren agreed, but I couldn't ignore the possibility, so I arranged for DNA testing. Thaddeus stiffened. You tested my DNA without my knowledge? I apologize for that, Warren said sincerely. But I needed to know. The results confirmed it beyond any doubt. We are brothers, Thaddeus. Full siblings. Caspar had gone very still. That would make us uncle and nephew, Warren confirmed, looking at him with genuine warmth. Family. Thaddeus shook his head, his expression troubled. This doesn't make sense. I have memories of my childhood. Foster homes, state schools. I was told my parents died in a house fire when I was young. What's your earliest clear memory? Warren asked gently. Thaddeus frowned, concentrating. I remember a hospital. Doctors asking me questions I couldn't answer. They said I had traumatic amnesia from the fire, that I might never remember my early years. The accident happened during a storm, Warren explained. Our car went off a bridge into the river. I was thrown clear, but our parents and Theodore, you, were swept away. They found our parents' bodies downstream, but not yours. You must have been rescued by someone who didn't report it, or perhaps you were found with no identification, no memory. This is... Thaddeus rubbed his temples. It's too much to take in. Emerson, who had been watching silently, spoke up. But doesn't it explain things? The gaps in your memory, the lack of family connections? Caspar looked at his father with new eyes. Dad, you always said you had no relatives, no one to turn to when Mom got sick. Because I didn't know I had any, Thaddeus exclaimed, his voice rising. He turned back to Warren. If what you're saying is true, you're telling me my entire identity has been a fiction, that I've been living someone else's life for 40 years. Not someone else's life, Warren countered. Your life just without the knowledge of your origins. You're still the same person, Thaddeus. You're still Caspar's father. You've just found the missing pieces. Thaddeus stood abruptly, moving to the window. His back to them, he asked, What happened after the accident to you? Warren's voice softened with old pain. I went to live with our mother's cousins in Connecticut. They were adequate guardians, but not particularly warm. I was 10, grieving, and suddenly alone in the world. When I turned 18, I used my inheritance to start building the business that eventually became Blake Healthcare. I named this hospital after our parents. Riverside, Thaddeus murmured. Because of the river where they died. Yes. A long silence followed. Finally, Thaddeus turned back to face them, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I need time to process this. It's overwhelming. Of course, Warren agreed immediately. Take all the time you need. The DNA results are here if you want to see them, along with newspaper clippings about the accident and some family photographs. As he placed the folder on the small table, Caspar stood and moved to his father's side, a gesture of solidarity that touched Warren deeply. Whatever you decide, whatever you need, Warren said earnestly, I'm here. We're family, Thaddeus. We always have been, even when we didn't know it. As Warren and Emerson prepared to leave, Thaddeus spoke again. Warren, if I am Theodore, what do you remember about me from before? Warren smiled, memories flooding back. You were fearless. You loved climbing trees and chasing fireflies. You had a stuffed elephant named Max that you carried everywhere, and you followed me around, constantly wanting to do everything I did. His voice grew husky with emotion. You were my little brother, and I loved you. I never stopped missing you. Thaddeus nodded once, unable to speak. Caspar showed them out, pausing at the door. Thank you, he said quietly to Warren, for finding him, for finding us. Warren looked at the young man, his nephew, with pride. Family always finds its way back to each other, Caspar. Sometimes it just takes a little longer than it should. As they walked away, Emerson slipped her hand into her father's. That was intense. Yes, it was, Warren agreed, but necessary. So, Caspar's really my cousin? He really is. Emerson smiled. I always wanted a cousin. Warren squeezed her hand, grateful for her uncomplicated acceptance. Behind them in the hospital room, a long-severed connection was beginning to mend. A family fractured by tragedy, slowly finding its way back to wholeness. The next few weeks brought a gradual reconciliation with the truth. For Thaddeus, accepting his true identity as Theodore Blake meant re-examining his entire life through a new lens. For Casper, it meant discovering a heritage and family connections he had never known existed. They began with small steps. Thaddeus asked to see more family. Photographs then listened to Warren's stories of their childhood. Dates and names were verified, timelines confirmed. The more they explored the past, the more certain Thaddeus became that Warren was indeed his brother. It explains so much, he confided to Casper one evening, as they looked through an album Warren had brought. The dreams I've always had of water, of falling, the strange familiarity I felt when I first saw this hospital. Casper studied a photograph of his grandparents, people he had never known he had. It's weird to think I have this whole family history I knew nothing about. I wish I could have told you sooner, Thaddeus said softly, but I didn't know myself. The physical therapy continued, and as Thaddeus grew stronger, so did the bond between the reunited brothers. Warren visited daily, sometimes with Emerson, sometimes alone. They talked for hours, Warren filling in the 40-year gap in Thaddeus's life, and Thaddeus sharing what he could remember of his life after the accident. The state placed me with foster families, Thaddeus explained during one such conversation. I bounced around a lot. No one really wanted a traumatized kid with memory issues. Warren's face shadowed with guilt. I should have looked harder. I should have known you were out there somewhere. You were a child yourself, Thaddeus reminded him. And everyone told you I was dead. You can't blame yourself. For Casper and Emerson, the revelation of their kinship transformed their friendship into something deeper. They discovered shared traits, the same stubborn determination, the same dimple when they smiled a certain way. That now made perfect sense. Technically, we're first cousins, Emerson mused as they walked home from school one afternoon. But it feels more like we've been siblings separated at birth or something. Casper laughed. Well, you're definitely the bossy older sister type. She nudged him playfully. And you're definitely the annoying little brother who's too smart for his own good. At school, the news that Casper was actually Warren Blake's nephew caused a seismic shift in the social landscape. James, who had been gradually warming to Casper anyway, now treated him with newfound respect. Others who had kept their distance suddenly found reasons to be friendly. Don't mind them, Aidan advised, having remained consistently friendly since their library confrontation. People are superficial. I'm still the same person, Casper pointed out. Exactly, Aidan agreed, which is why I liked you before and the others are idiots for only coming around now. As spring turned to early summer, Thaddeus was finally discharged from the hospital. The question of where he and Casper would live had been resolved by Warren's insistence that they move into the guest house on his estate. Temporarily, he had added, when he saw Thaddeus's expression, until you're fully recovered and decide what you want to do next. The day of the move was sunny and warm. Casper and Emerson packed the few belongings from the apartment, while Warren helped Thaddeus with the discharge paperwork. By afternoon, they were settled in the guest house, a small two-bedroom cottage on the grounds of Warren's estate that was 3 times the size of their former apartment. That evening they gathered for dinner on the patio between the main house and the guest house. As they ate and talked, the conversation naturally turned to the future. I've been thinking, Warren said, refilling Thaddeus's glass. With your background in construction, you might be interested in overseeing the expansion of the hospital's East Wing. We're adding a new pediatric center, and we need someone who understands both the building process and the patient experience. Thaddeus looked surprised. Are you offering me a job? Only if you want it, Warren replied. No pressure, but you have a unique perspective that would be valuable to us. Thaddeus considered this. I'd need to finish my recovery first, get back to full strength. Of course, Warren agreed. Consider it something to think about. Casper watched this exchange with quiet satisfaction. His father had always been proudest when he was working, contributing, using his skills. The illness had taken that from him for too long. As dinner concluded, and Emerson began clearing plates, Caspar found himself standing at the edge of the patio, looking out over the beautifully landscaped grounds. "Quite a change from the view at the apartment, huh?" his father said, joining him. "Yeah," Caspar agreed. "But you know what's weird? As nice as all this is, I'm most happy about you getting better, and about you finding your brother." Thaddeus, or Theodore as he was slowly becoming accustomed to being called, put an arm around his son's shoulders. "You're a good kid, Caspar. You always have been. I'm proud of how you've handled all this change." Caspar leaned slightly into his father's side, grateful for the strength that was returning to his once frail frame. "There is one thing I've been wondering about," Caspar said after a moment. "All these revelations about your past. It makes me think about Mom more." A shadow crossed Thaddeus's face. "What about her? I wish she could have known all this. That you had a family, a history." "She would have been amazed," Thaddeus agreed softly. "Evelyn always said everyone deserves to know where they came from." "I don't remember her saying that," Caspar said, turning to look at his father. Thaddeus's expression grew distant. "She said it a lot, especially when she talked about Stillwater." "Stillwater," Caspar repeated. "Was that where she was from?" "Yes," Thaddeus confirmed. "A small town about 2 hours north of here. She left when she was 18 and rarely went back. But she talked about it sometimes, especially when—" He trailed off. "When what, Dad?" Thaddeus seemed to come back from somewhere far away. "Never mind, old memories." Later that night, as Caspar lay in his new room, larger than their entire old apartment, he found himself thinking about his mother. He had been so young when she died that his memories of her were like fragments of a dream. The smell of her perfume, the sound of her laughter, the feeling of her hand stroking his hair as he fell asleep. His father rarely spoke of her, the pain of her loss still evident even after all these years. But now, with all the revelations about his father's true identity, Caspar found himself wondering about the other half of his heritage. Who had Evelyn Russell really been? What was her story? And why had she left Stillwater, apparently never to return? Tomorrow, he decided, he would ask his father more about his mother. It was time to complete the picture of his family, not just the Blake side that had been miraculously restored, but the Russell side as well. His mother deserved to be remembered, her story told. With that resolution, Caspar drifted to sleep, dreaming of a woman with his eyes who walked through fields of wildflowers, calling his name. "Stillwater," Warren repeated, looking surprised. I didn't realize Evelyn was from there." The family was gathered for Sunday brunch on the main house's terrace. 2 months had passed since Thaddeus and Caspar had moved to the estate, and such gatherings had become a cherished routine. Thaddeus, now comfortable with being called Theodore again, had been making remarkable progress. He walked with only the slightest limp, and had started working part-time as a consultant on the hospital expansion. "She never liked to talk about it." "Much," Theodore explained, spreading jam on his toast. "Said she had a difficult childhood there." Caspar, who had been quietly persistent in his questions about his mother over the past weeks, leaned forward. "But you did visit once, right? You told me yesterday that you went there with Mom before I was born." Theodore nodded reluctantly. "Once, yes, it didn't go well. Her family, her father in particular, didn't approve of me. We left after one day and never went back." "What was his objection to you?" Warren asked with brotherly indignation. A wry smile crossed Theodore's face. "I wasn't good enough for his daughter. Henry Ashford was old money, very conscious of social standing." He shook his head. "The irony that I was actually from a prominent family myself isn't lost on me now." "Ashford?" Emerson looked up from her phone. "The same Ashfords, who have that big estate near Lake Walden." Theodore shrugged. "Possibly. Evelyn didn't maintain contact with her family after we married. She said she'd chosen her path and didn't regret it." Caspar absorbed this new information hungrily. Every detail about his mother felt like a precious gift, a piece of the puzzle of his own identity. "Did she have siblings, other family I might have?" Theodore hesitated. "She had a sister, Beatrice. They were close as children, but had drifted apart by the time I met Evelyn. I think there was some kind of family rift." Have you ever thought about going back there, Casper asked, to Stillwater? Maybe her family is still around. They'd be my relatives too. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Theodore set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. Casper, I don't think that's a good idea. As I said, Evelyn left that life behind for a reason. But that was years ago, Casper pressed, and things are different now. I'm not asking to move there or anything, just to visit, to see where Mom came from. Warren, sensing the tension, intervened gently. It might actually provide some closure, Theodore, and Casper deserves to know about both sides of his heritage. Theodore looked torn. I don't want to stir up old troubles. Evelyn's father was a complicated man. He might not even be alive anymore, Emerson pointed out practically. It has been, 11 years since Evelyn passed, and he was already older then, right? That's true, Theodore admitted reluctantly. Casper saw his opening. Dad, please. You've discovered so much about your past recently. Can't I at least learn? Something about Mom's. Theodore looked at his son's earnest face and sighed. Let me think about it. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Casper remained preoccupied with thoughts of Stillwater and the Ashford family. After brunch, as he and Emerson were clearing the table, she nudged him discreetly. Check your phone, she whispered. In 5. The kitchen, Casper pulled out his phone to find Emerson had sent him a link to an article about prominent families in the Stillwater area. There prominently featured was the Ashford estate, a sprawling manor house set amid manicured grounds on the shores of Lake Walden. That could be your grandfather's place, Emerson said, coming to look over his shoulder. Pretty impressive. Casper stared at the photograph, trying to imagine his mother growing up in such grand surroundings. Why would she leave all that behind? Maybe for love, Emerson suggested. Your dad said they didn't approve of him. Maybe, Casper agreed, but something in his gut told him there was more to the story. That evening, as Casper was helping his father with some physical therapy exercises in the guest house, he broached the subject again. Dad, I've been thinking about Stillwater. Theodore's expression tightened, but he didn't immediately reject the topic. I figured you would be. I want to go, Casper said simply. With or without you, though, I'd prefer with. I need to know that part of my history, too. Theodore was silent for a long moment, focusing on the stretch he was performing. Finally, he straightened up. You're as stubborn as your mother, you know that. Casper smiled faintly. I'll take that as a compliment. It is, Theodore assured him. He sighed deeply. All right, we can go to Stillwater, but just to visit, just to look around. I'm not promising any grand family reunions. Casper's face lit up. Really, when? Next. Weekend, perhaps I'll need to arrange a few days off from the project. Without thinking, Casper threw his arms around his father, something he hadn't done since he was a small boy. Thank you, Dad. This means a lot to me. Theodore returned the embrace awkwardly, then pulled back with a gruff cough. Don't get your hopes up too high, son. The Ashfords weren't the warmest family even when Evelyn was alive. If any of them are still there, they might not welcome us with open arms. I understand, Casper assured him. I just want to see the place, maybe learn a little more about Mom's childhood. Later, as he prepared for bed, Casper gazed out his window toward the main house where light still glowed in the downstairs rooms. His life had transformed so completely in the past few months, from struggling to make ends meet to discovering an entire branch of family he never knew existed. Now he was on the verge of uncovering the other half of his heritage, the maternal side that had always been shrouded in mystery. His phone buzzed with a text from Emerson. Dad says we're all going to Stillwater next weekend. Family road trip. Hope that's okay. Casper smiled, typing back, More than okay, thanks for pushing him to say yes. I didn't have to push much. He thinks it's important too. Get some sleep, cousin. Casper set his phone aside, a sense of anticipation building within him. Stillwater awaited, and with it perhaps the final pieces of the puzzle of his identity. Whatever they found there, welcoming relatives or closed doors, at least he would know, at least he would have seen the place where his mother spent her childhood, walked the streets she had walked, seen the views she had seen. For a boy who had grown up with so little family, The prospect of discovering more of his roots was both thrilling and terrifying. But Caspar had faced greater challenges than this, and this time he wouldn't be facing them alone. Still water revealed itself. Gradually, as Warren's car wound along the tree-lined road that followed the shoreline of Lake Walden. The town itself was picturesque in a carefully maintained way. Historic buildings with fresh paint flower baskets hanging from ornate lampposts and quaint shops catering to the summer tourists who came for the lake. It hasn't changed much, Theodore observed from the passenger seat, his expression unreadable. In the back seat, Caspar pressed closer to the window, taking in every detail. Beside him, Emerson watched his reactions with quiet interest. "It's so perfect," Caspar murmured. Theodore made a non-committal sound. On the surface, they drove through the center of town, a charming main street with a town hall library and shops, and continued along the lake's edge, where the modest homes gradually gave way to increasingly grand properties set back from the road behind gates and hedges. "The Ashford estate is at the north end of the lake," Theodore directed Warren. "That private drive up ahead with the stone pillars." Warren slowed the car as they approached an imposing entrance with wrought iron gates. A discreet brass plaque read simply, "Ashford Lake House, private property." "Does anyone still live here?" Warren asked, peering through the gates at the long, tree-lined driveway beyond. "I don't know," Theodore admitted. "Evelyn lost touch with her family completely after our visit. She never spoke of them again. The gates were closed with no obvious intercom or method of announcing visitors." "Should we try anyway?" Emerson suggested. "There might be a caretaker or something." Theodore shook his head firmly. "No. Let's go into town first, get our bearings. If the estate is still in Ashford, Hans' news travels fast in Stillwater. They'll know we're here soon enough." They found a small inn on the main street that had rooms available, 2 adjoining suites that overlooked the town square. After settling in, they gathered in the larger suite to plan their approach. "I think we should start at the local library," Caspar suggested. "They might have town records, newspapers, information about the Ashford family." "Good thinking," Warren agreed, "and the town clerk's office for more official records." Theodore remained by the window, gazing out at the town with a distant expression. "I'll visit the cemetery," he said quietly. "Evelyn's mother is buried there. She died young. That much I remember Evelyn telling me." They agreed to split up. Theodore and Warren would visit the cemetery and town offices, while Caspar and Emerson would explore the library and town. The Stillwater Public Library was housed in a stately red-brick building with tall windows and polished wood shelves. A librarian with steel-grey hair looked up as Caspar and Emerson entered, her professional smile freezing slightly as she studied Caspar's face. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "May I help you find something?" "Yes, please," Caspar replied. "We're researching local history, particularly about the Ashford family. Do you have any resources we could access?" The woman's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "The Ashfords, may I ask why you're interested?" Caspar hesitated, but Emerson stepped in smoothly. "It's for a school project. We're studying prominent families in the region." "I see." The librarian didn't look entirely convinced, but gestured toward a section at the back. "Local history is in that corner. The bound volumes of the Stillwater Gazette might be helpful. We have digital archives as well, if you prefer." As they moved toward the indicated shelves, Caspar whispered, "She recognized me, I think." "Did you see?" "How she looked at me. Maybe you just look like someone she knows," Emerson suggested, though she didn't sound convinced either. They spent the next hour poring through old newspaper clippings and town histories. The Ashfords featured prominently, founders of the town's main industry, a paper mill in the late 1800s, benefactors of the library, and hospital hosts of the annual summer gala that raised funds for local charities. "Your mum's family was basically Stillwater royalty," Emerson observed, showing Caspar a photograph of a grand party on the Ashford estate lawn, dated 1985. "Look, could that be her?" Caspar leaned closer, his heart racing as he examined the image of a young woman in a summer dress, standing slightly apart from the group, her expression serious despite the festive occasion. She couldn't have been more than 16, but Caspar instantly recognized his mother's eyes, his own eyes, looking back, at him across time. "That's her," he said softly. "That's Mom." "She looks sad," Emerson observed. "Not sad," came a voice from behind them. "Determined." They turned to find an elegant woman in her early 60s watching them. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a neat chignon, and she carried herself with the poised grace of someone accustomed to being noticed. "Evelyn always had that look when she was planning something," the woman continued, moving closer to examine the photograph. "Usually something that would horrify our father." Caspar stared at her, understanding dawning. "You're Beatrice, my aunt." The woman's composed expression faltered slightly. "And you must be Caspar." Her gaze moved to Emerson. "Though I don't know your companion." "Emerson Blake." Emerson introduced herself with an extended hand. "My father is Warren Blake, Caspar's uncle." Beatrice's eyebrows rose. "I wasn't aware Evelyn's husband had family of significance." "It's complicated," Caspar said. "We only recently discovered the connection ourselves." Beatrice studied him intently, her eyes, so similar to his mother's, taking in every detail of his face. "Margaret at the front desk called me immediately when you came in asking about the Ashfords. She thought I should know that someone with Evelyn's eyes was in town." A faint smile touched her lips. She was right. "Are you still living at the estate?" Caspar asked. "Yes. After Father passed 5 years ago, I inherited everything." She gestured at the newspaper they had been examining. "Though the Ashford fortune isn't what it once was. The mill closed a decade ago." Caspar had dozens of questions crowding his mind, but before he could ask any of them, Beatrice continued. "Your father is here too, I presume?" Caspar nodded. "He's at the cemetery with my uncle." "Ah," Beatrice considered this. "Well, I imagine you didn't come all this way just to look at old newspapers. Would you like to come to the house? We can talk more comfortably there." The invitation, though politely delivered, carried a hint of command. "I should let my dad know," Caspar said, reaching for his phone. "Of course. Tell him to meet us there in an hour. I assume he remembers the way." Without waiting for a response, Beatrice turned and walked toward the exit. Her posture perfect, her heels clicking authoritatively on the marble floor. Emerson let out a low whistle once she was gone. "Well, she's formidable." "She's exactly how my dad described the Ashfords," Caspar replied, texting his father quickly. "Proper, controlled, intimidating." "But she invited us to the house," Emerson pointed out. "That's a good sign, right?" Caspar wasn't so sure. Beatrice's invitation had felt more like a summons than a welcome, but it was what he had come for, a chance to learn about his mother's past, to understand the family she had left behind. His phone buzzed with a reply from Theodore. "Be careful, we'll meet you there." Outside the library, they found Beatrice waiting in a vintage Jaguar. "Follow me," she instructed through the open window. "The gates can be tricky if you don't know the code." As they walked to where they had agreed to meet Warren and Theodore, Caspar felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. He was about to enter his mother's childhood home to meet family he had never known existed. But his father's warning echoed in his mind, making him wonder what exactly had happened all those years ago to drive his mother away from her privileged life in Stillwater. Looking back at the retreating Jaguar, Caspar couldn't help feeling that they were being drawn into something complex, an old family drama that had never truly concluded, and somehow he sensed he was about to become a central player in its final act. The Ashford estate was even more impressive up close than it had appeared in the old photographs. The main house, a sprawling 3-story structure of grey stone with multiple gables and chimneys, commanded a rise overlooking the lake. Gardens stretched in every direction, though Caspar noticed they had a slightly untended quality, as if maintaining their former glory had become too much effort. Beatrice led them through a grand entrance hall with a sweeping staircase and into a sitting room where tall windows framed views of the water. The furniture was elegant, but showed signs of age. The silk upholstery faded in patches, the wood dulled from years of polishing. "Please make yourselves comfortable," Beatrice said, gesturing to the seating arrangement. "I'll have Marta bring tea." When she had left the room, Emerson whispered, "This place is incredible, like something out of a period drama." But past its prime, Caspar observed, noting the fine layer of dust on a side table, the slight sag in the once grand curtains. They didn't have long to speculate before the doorbell rang, announcing Warren and Theodore's arrival. Moments later, they were shown in by an elderly housekeeper. Theodore's face was tight with tension as he entered, his eyes scanning the room as if expecting trouble. "It hasn't changed," he murmured to Warren. "Not a single chair moved in 15 years. Beatrice returned with a tea tray, followed by the housekeeper with a plate of small sandwiches and cakes. "Theodore," she acknowledged with a nod. "It's been a long time." "Beatrice." Theodore's reply was equally cool. "This is my brother Warren, Blake." If Beatrice was surprised by this introduction, she hid it well. How unexpected. Evelyn never mentioned you had a brother. "I didn't know myself until recently," Theodore explained. "It's a long story." "I imagine it is." Beatrice poured tea with practiced precision. "Almost as long as the story of why you've suddenly appeared in Stillwater after all these years." Theodore's jaw tightened. Caspar wanted to know about his mother's family. I couldn't deny him that knowledge. Beatrice turned her attention to Caspar. "And what exactly do you hope to learn?" Caspar. Evelyn chose to separate herself from this family, from this town. She made her feelings quite clear. "I just want to understand who she was," Caspar replied honestly. "Growing up, Dad didn't talk about her much. It was too painful, but now—" He glanced around the room. "Being here, seeing where she grew up, it makes her more real somehow." Something in Beatrice's expression softened slightly. "You have her directness." Evelyn never hedged or equivocated. "It drove our father to distraction." She set down her teacup. "What has Theodore told you about why Evelyn left Stillwater?" "Not much," Caspar admitted. "Just that her family didn't approve of him." Beatrice laughed without humor. "That's certainly the simplified version." She looked at Theodore. "Have you told him anything about the real reason?" Theodore shifted uncomfortably. "Beatrice, I'm not sure this is necessary." "If he came for the truth, he deserves the whole truth," Beatrice countered. She turned back to Caspar. "Your grandfather, Henry Ashford, was a difficult man, brilliant in business but cold as a father. He had very specific expectations for his daughters, especially after our mother died when we were young. I conformed. Evelyn rebelled." "Rebelled how?" Caspar asked. "In every way possible," Beatrice replied with a hint of admiration. "She refused the life he mapped out for her, college at his alma mater, marriage to the son of one of his business associates, a place on the hospital board. Instead, she applied to art school, dated inappropriate boys, and generally made him furious." "She was an artist?" Caspar asked, surprised. This was a detail his father had never mentioned. "Quite talented," Beatrice confirmed, but father dismissed it as a hobby. When she persisted, he threatened to cut her off financially. "So she left." "Because of that," Emerson interjected. Beatrice's gaze shifted to Theodore. "Not exactly. The final break came later. After she met Theodore." Theodore looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Beatrice, perhaps we should—" "Dad," Caspar interrupted. "Please, I need to know." After a long moment, Theodore nodded resignedly. Beatrice continued. "Father was never going to approve of Theodore. He wasn't from the right family, didn't have the right education or prospects. But Evelyn was 22 by then, and less concerned with his approval. They were planning to marry anyway." "Then what happened?" Caspar pressed. When she paused. "Evelyn discovered something," Beatrice said carefully. "Something about father that changed everything. A betrayal that went beyond his usual controlling behavior." Warren leaned forward. "What kind of betrayal?" Beatrice hesitated, then rose gracefully. "Perhaps it would be easier to show you." She crossed to a bookshelf and removed a leather-bound volume. "This is father's journal from 1990, the year Evelyn left. She found it in his study and read enough to understand that her entire life had been built on lies." Theodore stood abruptly. "Caspar doesn't need to see that." "What is it, Dad?" Caspar asked, confused by his father's reaction. "What didn't you tell me?" A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Theodore sighed deeply. "Your grandfather had been manipulating Evelyn's life since she was a child, not just with rules and expectations, but by actively sabotaging any path she tried to choose for herself." He intercepted college acceptance letters, bribed her art teachers to discourage her, even paid off a boy she was serious about in high school to break up with her. Casper felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. That's horrible. It gets worse, Beatrice said quietly. When she met Theodore and it became serious, Father hired a private investigator to dig into his background, looking for something he could use to break them up. Warren looked at his brother sharply. Did he find something? No, Theodore said firmly. There was nothing to find. But that didn't stop him from fabricating evidence, supposedly from the investigator, claiming I had a criminal record, other women in different cities' financial scams. He showed these fake reports to Evelyn, Beatrice continued, hoping she would end the relationship. But she didn't believe him. Instead, she confronted Theodore, who of course denied everything. That's when she became suspicious, not of Theodore, but of her father. So she found his journal, Casper concluded, and learned the truth about how he'd been manipulating her. Beatrice nodded, opening the journal and turning to a marked page. He detailed everything in here, every interference, every lie. He saw it as protecting her, but Evelyn saw it for what it was, control. That's when we left, Theodore said softly. She was so angry, so hurt. She said she never wanted to see this place again, never wanted anything from her father. She came to say goodbye to me. Beatrice recalled her composure slipping for the first time. I begged her to reconsider, to at least stay in touch, but she was adamant. She said Stillwater had too many ghosts, too many lies. Casper tried to process this revelation. So that's why she never talked about her family, why we never visited. Yes, Theodore confirmed. She wanted to protect you from all of it. But there's more, Beatrice said, returning to her seat. After Evelyn left, Father seemed to deflate somehow. The fight went out of him. He tried to contact her several times over the years, but she returned his letters unopened. I didn't know that, Theodore admitted, surprised. When he learned of her death, Beatrice continued, her voice softening, something broke in him. He became obsessed with finding you, Casper. He wanted to know his grandson, perhaps to make amends through you for what he'd done to Evelyn. He tried to find me, Casper asked, startled by this information. Yes, he hired investigators, but Theodore had changed jobs several times, and you'd moved apartments. The trail was difficult to follow. Theodore looked stunned. I had no idea. He never reached out to me directly. He wouldn't have, Beatrice said with a sad smile. Pride was always his downfall, but he did leave something for Casper. Something he hoped would one day find its way to him. She rose again, moving to a small writing desk in the corner. From a drawer she withdrew a wooden box about the size of a large book, intricately carved with a pattern of leaves and vines. With great care she brought it to Casper. Your mother left this with me the day she left Stillwater. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should make sure you received it when you were old enough to understand. Beatrice placed the box in his hands. I've kept it all these years, hoping you would come. Henry added his own letter before he died. It's inside as well. Casper stared at the box, feeling its weight, both physical and emotional, in his hands. Would you like some privacy to open it? Beatrice asked gently. Casper looked up at his father, then at Warren and Emerson, and finally at this aunt he had just met. All were watching him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. No, he decided. I'd like you all to be here. Whatever is in this box, it's part of our shared history now. With trembling hands he lifted the lid. Inside lay a sealed envelope with his name written in elegant handwriting, a small velvet pouch, and beneath these what appeared to be a journal, similar to the one Beatrice had shown them, but smaller with a faded blue cover. That's Evelyn's journal, Beatrice explained. She kept it from the time she was 12 until the day she left Stillwater. The letter is from her as well. The other envelope was added by Father. Casper carefully removed the letter with his name on it. The paper felt delicate, as if the years had rendered it fragile. Breaking the seal, he unfolded several pages, covered in the same elegant handwriting as the envelope. Would you like me to read it? Emerson offered quietly, seeing his hesitation. Casper shook his head. No, I need to do this. Taking a deep breath, he began to read aloud, his voice growing stronger with each word. My dearest Casper, if you are reading this, then I am no longer with you, and you have found your way back to Stillwater, to the beginning of my story. I don't know how old you are now or what circumstances have brought you here, but I hope your father is by your side and that the years have softened the sharp edges of the past. I left you this letter and my journal because everyone deserves to know where they come from, the truth of their roots, both the beautiful and the painful parts. My childhood in this house was complicated, filled with privilege but also with isolation and control. My father, your grandfather, believed he knew what was best for everyone, especially his daughters. He loved us, but his love was a constraining thing, a cage built of expectations and manipulations. When I discovered the extent of his interference in my life, I reacted with the rage and hurt of youth. I cut all ties, burned all bridges. Perhaps that was a mistake. Perhaps there could have been reconciliation given time, but the path we choose in moments of pain often becomes the road we must follow, even when our hearts have changed. I want you to know that leaving Stillwater was the hardest decision I ever made until I had to leave you and your father. My life with Theodore brought me more joy than I ever imagined possible, and you, my beautiful boy, were the greatest gift of all. Whatever happens, never doubt that you were loved completely without reservation or condition. Your father is a good man, Casper. He has his flaws, as we all do, but his heart is true. Trust him to guide you, but remember that you must ultimately forge your own path. As for my family, for Beatrice, who I hope has given you this box, and for my father, if he still lives, know that the past is complex and people are more than their worst mistakes. I never stopped loving them, even when I couldn't find a way back to them. The journal will tell you more about the girl I was. The pendant in the velvet pouch belonged to my mother, your grandmother, Eleanor. It should have been mine on my 18th birthday, but I left before then. Now it belongs to you, a small piece of the heritage that is your birthright. Remember, my darling boy, that you come from two worlds, your father's honest simplicity and my family's complicated legacy. Take the best from both and create your own story. With all my love across whatever distance separates us, Mom. Casper's voice broke on the final word. The room was silent except for the ticking of an ornate clock on the mantelpiece. He carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope before reaching for the velvet pouch. Inside was a silver pendant on a delicate chain, an intricately crafted tree with tiny emeralds for leaves. The Ashford family tree, Beatrice explained softly. It's been passed down for generations. Mother wore it always. Theodore's expression had softened as Casper read Evelyn's words. She never told me about the letter or the box. She must have written it when she first got sick, before we knew how serious it was. Would you like to read your grandfather's letter as well? Beatrice asked. Casper nodded, setting aside the pendant and reaching for the second envelope. The handwriting here was different, bold, angular strokes that conveyed authority even in script. The letter inside was shorter, a single page dated just months before Henry Ashford's death. To my grandson, Casper, we have never met, a fact that remains my greatest regret. Your mother, my Evelyn, was right to leave when she did. I was wrong, in ways I only came to understand too late. Pride and fear drove my actions. Pride in the Ashford name and fear that Evelyn would throw away her potential. I believed I was protecting her, but in truth I was only protecting my own vision of what her life should be. I tried to find you after she passed, but perhaps it is fitting that I failed. Some mistakes cannot be undone, some bridges cannot be rebuilt once burned. Know that the Ashford legacy is yours if you want it. Beatrice will explain what that means in practical terms, but more importantly, know that somewhere in this flawed old man's heart there was love, misguided and poorly expressed, but real nonetheless. Your mother was the best of us, brave enough to forge her own path, strong enough to stand by her choices. If you have inherited even a fraction of her spirit, you will go far. Henry Ashford. Casper carefully returned this letter to its envelope. Aswell then looked up at the faces surrounding him, his father, his uncle, his cousin, and the aunt he had just met. Each represented a different branch of his heritage, a different piece of the puzzle of his identity. "Thank you," he said to Beatrice, "for keeping this for waiting." She inclined her head gracefully. "It was the least I could do. For Evelyn." "For you." Theodore reached over to squeeze his son's shoulder. "Your mother would be proud of you, Casper. of the young man you've become. As the afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the room, Caspar felt a sense of completion settling over him. The box in his hands contained not just mementos and letters, but a connection to the past he had always wondered about, to the mother whose absence had shaped his life, and to the family history that was his birthright. He would read his mother's journal later in private. For now it was enough to know that it existed, that her thoughts and feelings had been preserved, waiting for him to discover them when the time was right. The afternoon stretched into evening at the Ashford estate as years of silence gave way to hours of conversation. Beatrice insisted they stay for dinner, and as they gathered around the ornate dining table, Theodore, Warren, Emerson, Caspar, and Beatrice, the initial tension gradually dissolved into a more comfortable exchange. "This house has been too quiet, for too long," Beatrice observed, watching as Marta served the main course. "It's good to hear voices in this room again." After dinner, they moved to the library, a book-lined sanctuary with leather chairs and a fireplace. Here, Beatrice elaborated on Henry Ashford's letter and what he had meant by the Ashford legacy. "Father restructured his will after Evelyn died," she explained, removing a document from a desk drawer. "Half of the estate was left to me, but the other half he placed in trust for you, Caspar." Caspar stared at her in shock. "For me? But he never even met me." "Perhaps that's why," Beatrice suggested. "A gesture of reconciliation too late for Evelyn, but not for her son." She handed him the document. "The trust becomes accessible when you turn 21 or earlier for educational expenses. It includes a significant portion of Ashford Industries' remaining assets, as well as property and investments." Theodore frowned. "Caspar doesn't need—" "Dad," Caspar interrupted gently. "I think this is more about what grandfather needed, to make amends somehow." He looked at the document thoughtfully before handing it back to Beatrice. "I'll need time to think about this." "Of course," she agreed. "There's no rush. The trust is well managed and will continue to be, whether you choose to claim it now or years from now." Later, as the evening wound down, Beatrice offered to show Caspar his mother's childhood bedroom, preserved much as she had left it. "Are you sure you're up to this?" Theodore asked as Caspar rose to follow Beatrice. "It's been an emotional day already." "I'm sure," Caspar affirmed. "I want to see it." Evelyn's room was on the third floor, a corner suite with windows facing both the lake and the gardens. Unlike the formal perfection of the rest of the house, this room felt more personal, with bookshelves crammed with novels and art books, walls adorned with framed sketches, and a window seat piled with faded cushions. She spent hours on that window seat, Beatrice recalled, drawing or reading or just watching the lake. It was her sanctuary when Father was being particularly difficult. Caspar moved slowly around the room, taking in every detail. A collection of art supplies still sat on a small desk. A high school pennant hung over the bed. Photographs in simple frames showed a younger Evelyn, with friends with Beatrice, occasionally with both parents before her mother's death. "She was happy sometimes," Beatrice said, noticing Caspar's focus on a photograph of Evelyn laughing beside the lake. "There were good days among the difficult ones." "I wish I had more memories of her," Caspar admitted. "I was so young when she died." "Perhaps these will help," Beatrice said, opening a closet door to reveal several storage boxes. Her sketchbooks, photographs, mementos she left behind when she departed so hastily. "I've kept everything, hoping one day." She trailed off, then smiled faintly. "Well, hoping for this day, I suppose." Back in the library, Theodore was deep in conversation with Warren while Emerson browsed the bookshelves. They looked up as Caspar and Beatrice returned. "We should think about heading back to the inn," Warren suggested, noting the late hour. "Actually," Beatrice said, "I was hoping you might consider staying here. We have plenty of room, and it would give Caspar more time with Evelyn's things." Theodore hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of spending the night in the house he had visited only once before, under such different circumstances. "I think we should," Caspar said, looking to his father with quiet determination. "Just for tonight." After a moment, Theodore nodded. "All right, if that's what you want." As Beatrice showed Warren and Emerson to their rooms, Caspar and Theodore remained in the library, the weight of the day's revelations hanging between them. "Are you okay, Dad?" Caspar asked, noticing his father's drawn expression. Theodore sighed deeply. "It's strange being here. This house, when it represents everything Evelyn rejected, everything she ran from. But she didn't reject it because it was bad," Caspar pointed out. "She rejected the control, the manipulation, not the place itself or even her family entirely. She kept that journal. She wrote me that letter." "You're right," Theodore acknowledged. "Evelyn was never one for simple answers or clean breaks, despite what it might have seemed. She carried this place with her in ways I probably never fully understood." Caspar hesitated, then asked the question that had been forming since he first read his mother's letter. "Did you know about grandfather trying to contact us after she died?" Theodore shook his head. "No. We were moving around a lot then. I was taking whatever work I could find, and we changed apartments 3 times in 2 years. Any letters could have easily been lost." "Would you have responded if you had known?" "I don't know," Theodore admitted honestly. "I was angry at him for how he'd hurt Evelyn. But for your sake, maybe. You deserve to know your family, all of it." "We're finding it now," Caspar said simply. "Better late than never, right?" Theodore smiled the tension in, his shoulders easing slightly. "When did you get so wise?" "Must be those Ashford genes," Caspar joked, then grew serious again. "Dad, about the trust, that's your decision," Theodore interrupted. "Whatever you choose, I'll support you. Even if I decide to accept it." "Even then," Theodore reached out to clasp Caspar's shoulder. "Evelyn would want you to have every opportunity, every choice she fought for. If her father's legacy can provide that, then so be it." Later that night, alone in the guest room Beatrice had prepared for him, Caspar finally opened his mother's journal. The blue cover was worn smooth at the edges, and the pages had yellowed slightly with age. Evelyn's handwriting filled the pages, sometimes neat and controlled, sometimes hurried and slanting, depending on her mood. He read for hours, absorbing the thoughts and feelings of the girl who would become his mother, her frustrations with her father's expectations, her close relationship with Beatrice before life pulled them in different directions, her dreams of art school and a future beyond Stillwater, her first loves and heartbreaks. The journal ended abruptly, with an entry dated the day after she discovered her father's betrayal. "I'm leaving tonight. Theodore is picking me up at midnight. Dad doesn't know yet, but he will by morning. Beatrice is heartbroken, but I can't stay. Not after what I've learned. Not after seeing in black and white how methodically he's tried to control every aspect of my life. I'm taking nothing but clothes and a few books, nothing that was bought with his money, nothing that ties me to this place. I love this house, the lake, even the memories of happier times. But I love my freedom more. I love the life I can build with Theodore more. Someday, if I have children, I'll bring them back here just once to see the beauty of the lake at sunset, to feel the history in these old walls. But they will grow up free of the chains of expectation that nearly suffocated me. This is my last entry in this journal. I'm leaving it with Beatrice along with a letter for my future child in case I never find the courage to return. In case the bridges I'm burning tonight can never be rebuilt. Goodbye, Stillwater. Goodbye, Father. I hope someday you understand that love without freedom is just another form of captivity. Evelyn?" Caspar closed the journal, tears streaming down his face. He had found his mother's voice at last, clear, strong, principled. He understood now why she had left and why she had never returned. But he also understood that her departure hadn't been a rejection of everything Stillwater represented. She had saved pieces of it, her journal, the pendant, her memories, passing them to him as a birthright he could choose to claim or not. Through the window, he could see the lake shimmering in the moonlight, just as his mother had seen it countless times from her own room. The house was quiet now, the only sound the distant lapping of waves against the shore. In this moment of stillness, Caspar felt his mother's presence more strongly than he ever had before, not as a faded photograph or a dim childhood memory, but as a real person whose blood ran in his veins, whose choices had shaped his life. Tomorrow they would return to the city, to the new life they had built with Warren and Emerson. But they would go with a deeper understanding of the past, with questions answered and mysteries resolved. And they would go knowing that Stillwater was not just a place they had visited, but a part of their story. A story that continued to unfold with each choice, each connection, each step forward into the future. 3 months after the journey to Stillwater, Casper stood in the garden of Warren's estate, helping Emerson arrange chairs for the evening's gathering. The late summer air was warm, tinged with the scent of roses and the promise of autumn just around the corner. "Do you think we have enough seating?" Emerson asked, stepping back to survey their work. "I never know how many of Dad's colleagues actually show up to these things." "Better too many than too few," Casper replied, adjusting a row of chairs to perfect alignment. Tonight was a special occasion, the official announcement of the Theodore Blake Wing at Riverside Memorial, a new rehabilitation center specifically designed for patients with complex autoimmune conditions. Warren had insisted on naming it after his brother despite Theodore's protests. In the months since their discovery of the Ashford connection, much had changed. Beatrice had visited twice gradually, building a relationship with the nephew she had only just met and reconnecting with the brother-in-law she had known so briefly. Theodore, now fully recovered, had accepted a permanent position overseeing patient comfort and accessibility in all of Warren's healthcare facilities. And Casper had started his junior year at Riverside Academy with a newfound confidence that came from understanding both sides of his heritage. The Ashford Trust remained in place with Casper, deciding to use a portion for college expenses while preserving the bulk for his future. He had also begun visiting Stillwater one weekend each, month sometimes with his father, sometimes with Emerson, occasionally alone. Each visit deepened his connection to his mother's hometown and to Beatrice, who was proving to be a thoughtful mentor with insights into both the Ashford business interests and Evelyn's artistic legacy. "There he is, the man of the hour," Emerson said, nodding toward the house where Theodore had emerged onto the terrace. He was deep in conversation with Warren, gesturing with the animated enthusiasm he now showed regularly, a stark contrast to the frail, reserved man Casper had known before. The treatments began. Theodore caught sight of them and waved his smile warm and genuine. The transformation in his father still amazed Casper sometimes. Not just the physical recovery, but the emotional blossoming that had occurred since reconnecting with his brother and discovering his true identity. "Everything ready out here?" Theodore called as he and Warren descended the garden steps. "Almost," Casper replied. "Just a few more chairs to arrange." Warren surveyed their work with approval. "It looks wonderful." Beatrice just called. Her flight landed on time and she should be here within the hour. "She's bringing something from the estate," Theodore added. "She was very mysterious about it." Emerson laughed. "Aunt Beatrice loves her dramatic moments." The easy way she used the term Aunt Beatrice still caught Casper by surprise sometimes. The integration of their formerly separate families had happened with remarkable smoothness, as if the connections had always been there just waiting to be discovered. As evening approached, guests began to arrive: hospital board members, physicians, and owners to the new wing. Theodore greeted each one with the confidence of a man who had finally found his place in the world. Warren stood proudly at his side, the years of separation now overshadowed by the bond they had rebuilt. Beatrice arrived just before the formal presentation was set to begin, elegant as always, in a tailored navy dress. She carried a large flat package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "Sorry I'm cutting it close," she said, kissing Casper's cheek in greeting. "Traffic from the airport was dreadful." "What's that?" Casper asked, nodding toward the package. Beatrice smiled mysteriously. "You'll see soon enough. Where can I put it until the presentation?" Casper directed her to a table that had been set up for the unveiling of the architectural plans for the new wing. Beatrice placed her package carefully beside the covered display boards, adjusting its position with precise movements. Warren tapped a glass for attention, and the gathered crowd quieted. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. "This is a very special occasion for Riverside Memorial and for me personally." As Warren spoke about the vision for the new rehabilitation, Wing Casper found himself scanning the faces in the crowd. There was Aidan, who had become a true friend over the past year, and several of his other classmates from Riverside Academy. Mrs. Gonzalez, from their old apartment building, had been invited as a guest of honor in recognition of her years of caring for Theodore. Even Mr. Peterson from the market had come beaming with pride at his former employee's success. This new facility, Warren was saying, will change lives. It will offer hope to patients suffering from conditions once considered untreatable. And it will bear the name of someone who knows firsthand the difference proper care can make. My brother Theodore Blake. Applause filled the garden as Theodore stepped forward, visibly moved. Thank you, Warren. This honor means more than I can express. He paused, gathering his thoughts. A year ago, I was a very different man. My health was failing, my prospects grim. I was a single father doing my best to provide for my son, but the odds seemed insurmountable. His gaze found Casper in the crowd, and his expression softened. Through a series of events that can only be described as miraculous, my son Casper's quick thinking and courage led us to Riverside Memorial, to Warren, and eventually to the treatment that has given me my life back. The Theodore Blake wing will ensure that others facing similar challenges receive the same chance I was given, not just medical treatment, but hope, dignity, and a path forward. More applause followed, and Casper felt Emerson squeeze his hand briefly. Your dad's become quite the public speaker, she whispered. He's found his voice, Casper replied softly. After the formal presentation of the architectural plans, Beatrice stepped forward unexpectedly. If I might add something to tonight's celebration, she said, her cultured voice carrying across the garden. Warren nodded, curious. Of course, Beatrice. She moved to the table and retrieved her package. The new wing will bear the Blake name, honoring the family that has done so much for healthcare in this community. But another family's legacy is also represented here tonight. With careful movements, she unwrapped the brown paper to reveal a framed painting, a landscape of Lake Walden at sunset, the Ashford estate visible in the distance, rendered in vibrant colors and confident brushstrokes. This was painted by my sister Evelyn, Beatrice explained, her voice steady, despite the emotion evident in her eyes. Casper and Theodore's beloved Evelyn. She created this the summer before she left Stillwater. I've kept it all these years, and now it seems fitting that it should hang in the new wing named for her husband, a reminder that healing comes in many forms and that beauty can emerge from even the most difficult circumstances. A hushed appreciation spread through the gathering as the painting was displayed. Theodore moved to stand beside Beatrice, examining the artwork with wonder. I never knew she completed this, he said softly. She often spoke of this view, but she finished it the night before she discovered our father's journal, Beatrice explained. It was the last painting she created in Stillwater. Casper stepped closer, drawn to his mother's work. The brushstrokes seemed alive with energy and emotion, capturing not just the physical landscape, but something more intangible, a feeling of both belonging and yearning. He recognized in those strokes the same spirit he had discovered in her journal, in her letter to him, the fierce independence tempered by deep love that had defined Evelyn Ashford Blake. It's beautiful, he said simply. It belongs in the new wing, Beatrice affirmed, a touch of Ashford legacy alongside the Blake name, a reminder that Casper carries both. As the evening continued, with guests mingling and congratulating Theodore, Casper found a quiet moment to stand with his father and uncle near the garden's edge. The three men, grandfather, father and son, brother, brother and nephew, formed a tableau that would have seemed impossible just 1 year earlier. I wish Mom could see this, Casper said quietly. Theodore placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I think she can, in a way. She's here in you, in her painting, and the connections that have brought us all together. Warren nodded agreement. Family has a way of coming full circle even when the path seems broken beyond repair. Later, as the guests began to depart, Casper stood alone by his mother's painting, studying the details. The particular way she had captured the light on the water, the subtle shadows of the trees, the warm glow of windows in the distant estate. He felt a presence beside him and turned to find Beatrice watching him with a gentle smile. You have her eye, she observed. The way you notice details, see connections. Evelyn was the same. I'm starting to understand her better, Casper replied. Through her journal, her art, the stories you've shared. It's like putting together pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know was missing. Beatrice's gaze shifted to where Theodore and Warren stood in conversation across the garden. Our family story has had its share of tragedy and separation. But look at what's emerged from it all. New connections healing a future none of us could have imagined. Caspar followed her gaze, feeling a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter at a market stall had led to this moment. His father healthy and whole, his family expanded beyond his wildest dreams, his understanding of his own identity forever enriched by the discovery of both the Blake and Ashford legacies. "Do you think grandfather would be pleased?" he asked, referring to Henry Ashford. "About how things turned out?" Beatrice considered this thoughtfully. "I think he would be humbled by it, to see that despite his mistakes, despite the bridges he burned, something beautiful grew from the ashes." She touched the frame of Evelyn's painting lightly. "Families are complicated, Caspar. We hurt each other, we make terrible mistakes. But we also have the capacity for remarkable healing. That's the true legacy your mother left you, not the Ashford name or trust fund, but the understanding that love persists even when the path forward seems impossible." As the evening drew to a close, Theodore joined them by the painting. For a moment the three stood in contemplative silence, each lost in thoughts of Evelyn, sister, wife, mother, whose absence had shaped them all but whose love had ultimately brought them together. "It's getting late," Theodore finally said. "We should help Warren and Emerson clear up." "I'll be right there," Caspar replied. Left alone with the painting, Caspar reached out to touch the frame, lightly tracing his fingers along the edge. "Thanks, Mom," he whispered, "for everything." The garden was peaceful now, the chatter of guests replaced by the gentle sounds of night. Crickets chirping a distant owl, the rustle of leaves in the light breeze. Above, stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that had shone over his mother in Stillwater, over his father in the years of struggle over all of them, on their journey to this moment of wholeness. Caspar took one last look at the painting before turning to join his family. In the brushstrokes of sunset light over Lake Walden, his mother had captured something timeless, the beauty that exists alongside pain, the possibility of renewal, the enduring power of love across generations. It was, he realized, the perfect emblem for their family story, not an ending but a continuation, a legacy of love that would flow forward through him, through all of them, long after this night had passed into memory. "Coming, Caspar," Emerson called from the terrace. "Yes," he answered, stepping away from the painting and toward the waiting embrace of his family. "I'm coming."